Hello and welcome to NewsNight. I am Ladi Akiridoluale. Thanks for being with us. My guest on the program today believes Nigeria's National Development Plan 2021 to 2025 is implementable, provided it is done by the right people in the right positions. My guest also says Nigeria's private sector can more than match up to its required level of funding for the plan because it already accounts for more than that as a function of spending in the national economy. NewsNight talks to the president and founder of the ANAP Foundation at Peterside. Mr. Peterside, thank you for your time. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
The National Plan 2021 to 2025, the National Development Plan, has just been unveiled. What's your first impression of this plan?
I think my first impression is to say that this plan was done correctly in the sense that it is not a federal government of Nigeria plan. That was the mistake sometimes in the past. This is a national development plan, so it is the actors that came together to put the plan were federal government, state governments, LGAs, private sector. So the point I'm making is that it is not a plan of one of those four groups. It's a plan put together by all. Now, so that is fundamental. And I say it's fundamental because people talk about Nigeria and you don't blame them because every day people think about government, government, government. But please, you have to understand how small our government sector is. And I explain it best as an economist by referring to the size of aggregate demand of goods and services in Nigeria, purchased or consumed. Government share, all three tiers of government together, is only 8.5%. So Nigeria is a private sector economy. So it's 91.5% of the economy, whether we like it or not, is private sector. And if you don't believe me, I mean, I'm not sure where you come from. If you go to your village and look at the activities that are taking place economic, how much is government versus how much is private sector? So whether we like it or not, by default, Nigeria is a country that the economy is private sector dominated. The impact of government is that they control policy, not that they control all the spending. So all that spending in your village, very little is from government. Same in my village. So I point that out because if you begin from that premise, many other things follow.
Well, but there are quite a number of people who have said, is it a realistic plan in that 85% or thereabouts of the almost 350 trillion that is expected to be spent over the next 5 years is expected to come from that private sector that you've just described. Can the private sector, does Nigeria's private sector have that capacity?
So to answer your question directly about whether it is realistic, at this point you cannot separate the economy from politics. If you create the wrong political environment, if you bring in bad policies, if you do not create an enabling environment, then the expectation from the private sector becomes unrealistic. Conversely, if you have people in government who instill confidence, bring out the right policies, create an enabling environment, Nigeria's private sector, indeed private sector, not Nigeria's because it's local and foreign, can more than respond. So it's all about the enabling environment you create.
In which case, if one is now to take a look at it, broadly speaking, I mean, if you say this is a 5-year development plan, but given our antecedents as a country, each time there's been and I'm happy you mentioned the role that government plays in this.
Yes.
Each time there is a transition from one government to another, as we have started the process of, because in less than 2 years, about 18 months or so from now, there should be another government in place.
Sure.
New governments in Nigeria usually come with their own policies, their own priorities, and so on. And therefore, the fate that previous development plans have suffered, when that happens, why is this one, do you think, if you think, going to be different?
You see, this is why I said it's about the political environment, and to even help your case, your argument further. Even present governments themselves, you're talking about new government, current governments themselves in Nigeria have been known to abandon things in their own plan and start picking policies, picking programs, investments ad hoc that were not even in the plan at all because there was no discipline. No discipline in the sense that the leadership did not make such things impossible. So that's why you will find that a businessman would come to government, lobby. I want the government to do this or invest in this, invest in that. Whether it's in their plan or not, if you have enough clout, you may get them to change all the rules and buy into your project. So those things have happened before. That's why I said that you cannot separate the politics from the economics. If we have an environment where people are politically active, everybody is sensitized, and I think that the worse our economic problems, the more many people are taking an active interest in the economy now, because really they have no choice. People have realized that the economy is everything. So people are going to have to also realize that politics too is everything, because politics can trump economics. So people are, you cannot take an interest in the economy and stay out of politics, because politics will destroy the economy. So people are going to find by default they have to take an interest in both. And that's why some of us are also separately campaigning for the educated youths to get politically active, because it is important that you have that kind of pressure that holds those in government, hold their feet to the fire, so they must deliver on some things. So the point I'm making is that political pressure, if it is not there, is why some plans derailed in the past. So to conclude on your question, if you just bring out a plan and there's no political pressure, nobody is demanding anything, the chances are that plan will not be implemented. So you will be right. So what makes the difference is the people demanding that we want some deliverables. That's what makes the plan work.
In which case, that goes back now to the politics.
Exactly.
Our politics has also suffered. In fact, as you've just pointed out, perhaps it is because our politics has so far been described as not being the most stable, that our economy is also not one of the most stable. Now, if once that link is established, it appears that people like you, as you've just also said, are now also having to focus on the politics. But it does appear as if before now, so many people like you have stayed away because they had said, I'm not interested in this dirty thing. There are no rules in it, and the rules such as there are mostly being observed in the breach, shall we say. Now, what was the turning point for you?
Okay, let me just clarify something. When I'm talking about political activism, it does not necessarily mean that you must be voted for, you must take part in an election. I'm talking about taking an interest in the affairs of the nation and demanding the right action that is required to move Nigeria forward. Many more people, millions, have to get involved in that activity that I've just described broadly.
Right.
So at the other extreme is what has crept up, which is large volumes of educated youths deciding to opt out. I have no more interest. I won't vote. I won't register. There's no point. It's a waste of my time. When you do that, what have you achieved? You've surrendered your birthright to the politician who gets elected, because on getting into office, he can do whatever he likes, because you have told him that you are not interested. So you're not interested in your own future. So why do you expect him to deliver on your future? So the issue now is that I think more people will get politically active. It may not necessarily be business persons. In any case, with due respect to my business colleagues, many of them are more frightened about hanging on to the perks of whatever business, income, wealth they have. The people whose destiny is on the line are the youths. They are the ones who still have decades in front of them. They are the ones who must take part in the process, right down to registering to vote, right down to questioning who is being elected. What does this man have to offer? Do you know that even that selection process can bring improvement if there are many educated youths involved in demanding what kind of person or persons must represent them? They grill you, ask you questions, you must subject yourself to interviews, to all sorts of debates and all. Then there will be less chance that we elect or put anybody in any office who is completely ill-equipped for the position. Many of us in our private businesses are very careful who we hire. We ask the person hundreds of questions, grill them, do background checks. When it comes to elective office, they just produce somebody. The person might even dodge every debate, every discussion. And I put it one other way. It's a dangerous mistake to give somebody a high position of leadership if you cannot already write almost a book on his leadership style. Are you going to put somebody in a high office and then discover after he's in that office his own style on leadership? We should be able to discuss Mr. X, his leadership style, and say this is the way he approaches things. This is what he has done before. This is what he has written. This is what he has said. It is dangerous to put people into office who have done nothing or said nothing, and then you discover after they're in office whether or not they have the style you want, the knowledge you're looking for. So I think that all these things are going to be mixed together. And I suspect also, one last comment on this particular subject is that the reason many more people will be interested this time in asking who are the people we are picking to represent us, who are the leaders we are backing, is because many people feel let down and think they've made bad mistakes before. So some of them are saying never again. What's the meaning of never again? Never again will I allow people to just bring somebody, show his photograph and say he's the one I must vote for. But many people will say no. Let that man come out and stand in front of us, open his mouth and talk. Let's ask him some hard questions. So we want to improve also the process. Because when the process is wrong, it's when you get the wrong actors emerging and taking control.
Offices. Now, the youth that are currently in play, quite a lot of them have also displayed some tendencies that don't indicate that perhaps they are ready for this kind of task you're saying. They themselves don't appear to be equipped to do some of these tasks that you've mentioned. That so maybe the other aspect of what needs to be done is to also do the equipping of those people to be able to participate.
Like every other country, we have all kinds. We have the whole range in terms of youths. We have youths who are fantastic, who look like they will be fantastic future leaders. We have youths who look like they are not yet ready for things for that type of thing. We have youths who are worried. We have youths who are invested emotionally in their country. We have youths who are withdrawn. We have youths who are frustrated. We have youths who are... So we have the whole range. We're a country of 200 million people. So what I always tell people is that you can find any kind of person among that 200. So, and for every quality you define, there are enough people who have that quality in that grouping. Please, let's remember that Nigerian youth are over 100 million.
Yeah.
So the point is that in the 100 million people, there are leaders. In the 100 million people, there are entrepreneurs. In 100 million people, of course, there are also those who are truants. So I'm saying that all are represented. What happens is that some of the older people who want to continue to dominate the scene, whenever you bring up a discussion on youth, they immediately zero in on the youths who happen to be responsible and say, okay, are these your youths? Okay, how about the elders themselves? How good are they? I'm sure you can, for every one responsible elder, I'm sure you can find 3 or 4 who are irresponsible. Not only that, please, let's think also that we have some youths who are very, very well educated, knowledgeable. Now, whether they will make it into a position of leadership is partly a function of the type of political process we put in place. If you have a bad process, and here I would digress a little. You see, why was there so much furor as to how we transmit results from a polling booth to the Center for Collation? I think because everybody knew that there was a weakness, there's been an abuse of the process, whereby you go to the polling booth, you have 400 votes, the other man has 5 votes. At the collation center, a different result is coming out. Now, we appear to have decided, I say we appear because the law has not been signed, to have decided that things like that have to stop. In the 21st century, there's no reason why we cannot know, all of us know the results from that polling booth. We should all have it on our mobile phones. Count it there, announce it there. We all have a record of it. So that by the time you go to the center and you transmit it, the only result they can bring out from that polling booth at the center is the exact same one that we all saw. So when you have those, they sound like minor improvements in process, but they're the things that make it possible for good people to join the political process. Some people have come before and said, oh, go and join politics. People like you should get into politics. And when you question them a bit more, they admit that the way to win is as follows. You have to give money to INEC, give money to the police, give money to security agencies, get caught thugs so you can snatch ballot boxes of your opponents, get other people to stuff ballot boxes for you. Then you also get some cultists on your side, militants to intimidate people. So hang on a second, is that the politics you want me to get involved in? So which means that you're really saying that the way to win is to be the bigger criminal. So if you're looking for somebody who is the best criminal in Nigeria, then go and look somewhere else. Because what you're really saying is that the system will reward the biggest criminal of all. So I'm sorry, I'm not that criminal. In any case, why would I want to be worse than the people I'm condemning? That is, if you play by their rules and that is the only path to success, then you're as bad as them. Indeed, for you to beat them at that game, you must really be worse than they are. So the point I'm making is that we have to reform the whole process, electoral process, to make it possible for decent people to take part. And so the youths are right indirectly when they felt that that old system where people manufacture results was not credible. But at the same time, even if something is not credible, what you must do is to find the voice to argue to change the system. Leaving it to the bad guys to continue is never going to be the way.
I must, as you were saying that, something occurred to me, and I want to go back, because I mean, your calling as an economist for me is central to all of this. Did we put the cart before the horse when we released this plan before we did the national census?
No, you see, unfortunately, in a country like Nigeria, you have to do everything in parallel. There's no time. You have to do everything in parallel. People keep on saying things like, oh, some things should be sequenced. You do this first, then you do the other. I said, hey, first of all, some things in Nigeria are so difficult to do. Look at the electoral reform. So at the same time, you have to be doing a national development plan, carrying out electoral reform, talking about trying to improve the judiciary, talking about the rule of law, human rights. You have to do all in parallel. So it's almost like saying that each of these things is very important. It's a mistake to think that you want to sequence them. Because what does sequencing mean? If there are 10 things that are wrong, are you going to leave 9 and try and get the one right first, then the second, then the third? How many years will it take to go through the 10 different things that are wrong? But so my way is that you attack all the 10.
Well, but there are those who point at other countries, for the famous Asian tigers, and according to the story, those sequenced these events. They first of all went after heavy industry, then of course at that time many of them were dictatorships, then they progressed to lighter, more sophisticated technology, and then they became more democratic. You know the story. So,
Okay,
I mean,
now you're talking about just the economy alone. I think
Yes.
I was talking broader.
Okay.
That we have many things that were wrong. Look, President Yar'Adua won an election in 2007. And immediately after he won the election, said we have to carry out electoral reform. He was the beneficiary of what he himself must have felt was a bad election or a rigged election, and decided that we should not continue like this. Yes. So the point I'm making is that there are so many important things that are wrong in our society that we have to find the courage to attack all of them. In fact, what we don't want is to put people in office, leaders who either don't have the knowledge and understanding, or they don't have the courage to take on these issues head on. You see, there was a time when, even in my own adult life, if you ask me the qualities that you needed for a Nigerian leader, political leader, I would have mentioned a number of things. I might not have stressed courage. But today, in 2021, I will include courage. We do not want leaders who are knowledgeable but are timid and afraid. If you are afraid of your own shadow, you have no business trying to lead us. We want people who will stand up and be counted. Because the position where we are at today, many of the problems that we face must be tackled courageously. So I don't want to name names, but there were even some past presidents that were not known for courage. But it was probably okay for that time. But today, confronting the issues you see in front of you, bandits here, Boko Haram there, kidnappers, the whole range, the last thing we want is timid leadership. You know, because some of these non-state actors who cause so much trouble, they also understand them. You see, even a bully sometimes knows when a game might be up. Or even a bully can understand when something has become dangerous to continue in the same old way. So we need people who have that breadth of vision, who understand modern methods of dealing with things. Because these problems we are facing, perhaps the multitude being present in one place is unique to Nigeria, but each of these problems has surfaced somewhere before. So it's not true that what we are facing involves rocket science, but it tests leadership and the quality of leadership. And if you don't have the right leaders, you won't be able to confront all these problems.
Well, one of the things that seems to have surfaced and is now staring us in the face, and which some, like you, will probably argue require courage because of its possible aftermath, is this issue of subsidies and the removal of subsidies. Many governments have attempted it, faced with the wrath of the general population or with a segment of the general population, they retreat. Now it's been proposed again, this time for sometime next year, early next year, and already the drum beats are again sounding about it. First, of course, there are two arguments, and I want you to address both. There's the political and social argument side of it, and then there's the strictly economic argument, which is the one that talks about the costs and whether this can continue. Now, both of them, are they running parallel to each other?
No, you see, I think there's a knowledge issue here. You can bring some economists into a room, or even mathematicians into a room, and do a scenario, the price of oil. There's a level, you can calculate it, that if the price of oil gets to that level, and you continue with the subsidy. So let's imagine that the subsidy was there, the price of oil was $30 a barrel. If the price of oil gets to 100 or is 105, there's a level you will get to that all the federal government money will be consumed by the subsidy, and there'll be nothing left for anything else.
Aren't we already there?
No, we're almost there, but let's continue. So, and I think also that, so I'm trying to point out to you that you have to make choices. Life is about choices. The economy is about choices. There's a level at which if the oil price gets to, that the entire revenue will be consumed on just one item, petrol subsidy. So which means that there will be zero for education, zero for health, zero for security. Do we want to get there? Is that a destination that anybody wants? Now, let me explain one thing further. Solving any serious problem is the job of leaders. It is leaders that make a case for something. It's leaders that educate people, convince them on tough policies, and explain why something needs to change. What is the quality of the arguments that leaders are putting out? If you want to address fundamental things like the subsidy, you've got to be able to articulate your position very well. You have to be convincing. You have to go out and convince large numbers of people who stand in your way. And it's not enough to just throw one argument at them and say that I told them this and they refused. In fact, sometimes when I see some people, especially in NNPC, some of the arguments they make on subsidy, I wonder, does this man want the subsidy to continue or he wants it to end? Because the logical extension of what he claims to be saying, that is supposed to make people accept the subsidy to be removed, his argument is so bad that it's like he wants to sabotage the whole argument, perhaps because he's benefiting from the whole subsidy arrangement, which they are a major actor in. So actually the point I'm making is that for everything you do, the leadership is the one that takes the role. The leadership is the one that communicates, that sells the idea. I remember somebody telling me that one of the best speeches that they ever heard the German leader, Angela Merkel, make was the speech she made to the whole of Germany, explaining to them why she had to bring in a severe lockdown on account of COVID-19. They said when she delivered that speech, it was so convincing. Even some opponents who were waiting for her to finish the speech so they could jump out and argue against it. Some of them, after hearing the speech, they were they were destabilized. They couldn't even find their voices. So it's not as simple as saying that, oh, people have tried this before. How well did they sell the idea? How logical were the arguments? How convincing was it? All those things have to be measured. That's why I said that we're getting to a stage where leadership in Nigeria, to solve Nigeria's problems, you need skill, knowledge, communication skills, courage. All those things are required.
But do you think there is a political and social cost to some of such decisions? Courageous, yes. These are decisions that require courage because they affect large numbers of people, and in our own situation, they have spill-on. This one we're talking about has spill-on effects on even things that in other places may not be directly associated, but here they are. I mean, if there's an increase in the price, it's going to affect, apart from transport, it's going to affect rents, it's going to affect all kinds of other things. And that's why I asked about the political and the social costs. These ones I'm talking about are social. The political argument is that Nigeria has refineries that are not working.
Yeah. See, let's be careful, because people overplay this refinery argument. The refineries, refining is meant to be a low margin business, thin margin business. Whether we have refineries that are working or are not working, we cannot afford a subsidy. The only difference between the two, between refining the produce here yourself and importing the produce, is that if you took our oil here to refine it here, you have to add, then there's a thin margin to refine it here, and there's no cost to actually import the petrol from overseas. If our refineries are not working, then over and above the value of the oil and the margin for the refinery, you also have to add the cost of the freight, bringing the thing in here. But that is a small difference. That's not the issue. That is not the issue. The issue is that if the price of oil is $80 and you're selling petrol here at a price that is effectively $40, then there's a $40 subsidy, which is eating up government revenue. And this is a country where The government share of the government revenue, the share of GDP is only 7%, one of the lowest in the world. So which means that our governments begin with very low revenue, and then you dissipate all the revenue on one item, petrol subsidy. Also, on that petrol subsidy, who are the biggest beneficiaries? The richest people. It's a subsidy that the person that anybody can go and buy petrol. So the wealthiest people have the most cars, have the most boats, have the biggest need. So they get the lion's share of the subsidy. The poor man in the village, what is his own share of the subsidy? It's a tiny bit. So the biggest beneficiaries are the wealthiest people. All the data exists as to the impact of petrol price increases in Nigeria on general inflation level and so on. It's not that we've raised petrol price many times before in my adult life. So all the data exists. It's largely overblown, this whole idea that as soon as you raise petrol price by a tiny amount, all the prices will go to the roof and so on. You can have temporary dislocations, especially if there is some industrial action that disrupts the movement of goods and services, in which case people somewhere take advantage temporarily of that supply dislocation.
Right.
But it's not true that all of a sudden, everybody can afford to pay much higher prices for everything. If you go and ask most people in the marketplace selling consumer goods, fast-moving consumer goods, they will tell you, I don't want to name multinationals. There are many multinationals that have actually reversed their price increase. By that I mean they had a product, they raised the price by 5 naira. That little small increase, the consumer stopped buying. They have to bring the price back down. People can't afford. If they can't afford it, that's it. Where the bulk of our inflation comes from a different direction. Government has no revenue, and then we start financing government expenditures, consumption, through ways and means facility and other things, which means that effectively the money supply is expanding. So if you want to study inflation in Nigeria, go and look at the money supply, expression of the money supply, and look at the inflation rate. Then look at the exchange rate. You will see some very prominent correlation.
Where does debt come into all of this? Because when you mentioned ways and means, it was one of two things that has created a great deal of controversy, even between governments. That, for example, that the federal government has easier access to be able to spend its way out of trouble or out of a fiscal deficit by using these ways and means. And then it also has access to acquire a great deal of debt. And that debt, at the rate at which we're acquiring it, might prove to be unsustainable.
You see, in some other regimes, there's some friction between the monetary authority and the fiscal authority. When I say friction, because the monetary authority is saying, we cannot just finance you. We cannot just keep on creating more and more money for you. That, hey, you've got to do something real on your own side, which means you've got to control the costs, reduce your overheads, you've got to raise real revenue, and so on. In Nigeria, there's almost no friction. Are you aware of any friction between the monetary and the fiscal regarding there's almost no friction. Now, we have to be careful because some things cannot go on forever. People think that, if you just keep on funding government, expanding the money supply, somehow you will get growth. If it was that easy, guess what? Every country in the world will do it. So the point I'm making is that we have to do everything properly, because we're getting to the point now where even the federal government has more or less lost fiscal viability, in the sense that their own recurrent expenditures more or less consume, plus debt service, consume all the revenue plus a lot more, which means that they're effectively borrowing money for consumption. How long do you think this will go on for? Even if this government carries on doing that, until the end of his tenure, what will the next government have to do? So there's a problem about endless debt, especially debt that is used, whether we like it or not, for consumption.
The interventions, especially because there's something that has hung over all of this in the last 2 years, almost 2 years, shall we say, the advent of COVID disrupted a great deal of even strong economies that were on firmer footings than ours.
Sure.
Were very badly affected by the advent of COVID. And it doesn't seem as if it is going anywhere anytime soon. We've just been told of a new variant, which has just been discovered. Now, I'm wondering if you see, with everything we've said as thus far, whether that has featured in our own planning and in our own thinking about going forward.
Yes, you see, there was some, definitely everybody faced some COVID disruption. But I think that overall, with COVID, West Africa has had a mild crisis. When I say mild crisis, so please, I know we lost some people's lives, some people lost their lives, people were hospitalized. But when I say it's a mild crisis, at the very beginning, let's say, when I say beginning in West Africa, in March last year, some of us feared worse scenarios than what eventually unfolded. So that West Africa is one of those regions in the world that has had the mildest COVID crisis so far. Touch wood, let's hope it stays that way and we even escape it. So we cannot use COVID as the excuse to misbehave. In fact, I think we've gotten to the point now where we've understood now that it's about balancing lives and livelihoods. You see, if you go and start having endless travel bans, lockdowns, and everything, what's going to happen? You're going to destroy livelihoods. And when you destroy livelihoods in a poor country, you actually destroy lives. We are a very poor country in Nigeria. We cannot afford all those draconian measures that some other economies can take. Let's take just one item, travel ban. These countries, when they do a travel ban, the rich countries, they quickly follow that by putting up evacuation flights to take their citizens who are affected, who are trapped in the long place. In Nigeria's case, are we able to even do that? If we copy them and do a travel ban, we abandon Nigerians all over the world who are now stranded somewhere, and we have no plans to rescue them.
Up.
So
yeah.
we can't. So let's not copy things that, luckily and unluckily, are not really destroying our environment. Let's do things that are sustainable, do things in moderation. So that's why I'm very hostile to the idea of putting in place draconian measures that destroy livelihoods in the name of COVID. Let us emphasize the things that are easier and cheaper. Put on a mask, wash your hands. Those things are affordable. They're easier to do. Avoid huge gatherings indoor. The beauty of it also is that, whether we like it or not, the bulk of the poor people don't gather indoors. Most of the activities are outdoors, so they're even safer. In fact, it's the wealthy, it's the rich people like you, who go into an air-conditioned hall to have a function, and you're 1,000 packed like sardines, dancing to a band. So you're more in danger. In the village, the people, their life is more outdoor. Even if they're talking about entertainment, the bulk of it is outdoor. Because ideally, typically, they don't have any large air-conditioned hall anyway. So they are safer. Even our markets, there was a time when state governments were saying the market must close.
Must close,
I
yes.
was begging some of the governors, I said, listen, this market is outdoor. This market is outdoor. You follow me?
Yeah, but I guess many of those reactions appear to have been panic reactions.
Yes, but you see, let's please don't get me wrong. Even when there's a panic reaction, you should be able to read the data. Let's take the example of flights. Initially, I was in favor of saying, shut down the flights. Because for one simple reason, we were bringing in Europeans who might have been infected, and so that we could not control the rate of influx of travelers coming in with COVID. We didn't even have the ability to test at the beginning, if you remember, because
That's right.
so few tests.
Very free.
So for me, that closed down the travel was a temporary measure so that we could ramp up our testing Now, as you know, for the last 1 year or so, we have been in a position where we're able to test all travelers. If you can test all travelers, then the risk is severely diminished. As soon as you go and do a test, you want to travel. Each time I want to travel, and I do a COVID test. You know, I don't bother packing my belongings until the test comes back saying negative.
Yeah, that's right.
Exactly. So, so at that point, you have contained the lion's share of the problem. But it took a long time for get people to understand. In any case, you have to look at data. At the same time that we shut down all the travel and all that, Ethiopia, do you know Ethiopia never shut down travel? They were flying up and down. So my point was that, okay, let's imagine that we're doing something right and they are doing something wrong. In Africa, Nigeria is number 1 in terms of population. Ethiopia is number 2. So if we are locking down everything, we are stopping travel, Ethiopians are traveling up and down, the airline is flying. It's a different thing if all of them were dying. Then we can say, let's continue doing what we are doing because they're all dead in Ethiopia. But they were flying up and down, they were all alive. So they can't we see that the Ethiopian... so when, luckily the world is available for you to look around you and what you want to copy. So I was arguing that let us behave like the Ethiopians for goodness sake. Like us, they're living an outdoor life, even when they are traveling, minimal protocols, COVID test in advance, after you are, all that stuff, and the people are alive. So you can see you can decide who you copy, who you emulate.
I can't end this interview without asking you about this, and because we've talked about a lot in such a short time. We've talked about a lot, and I now want to project. Mm-hmm. You founded a bank that's become one of the biggest in the country. You're running your private business. You also have your foundation. And so I believe you are in a good position to look at, so to speak, a crystal ball. With everything we've said, with all the minds that are laid out for even the very best plans. This plan, 2021 to 2025, and with everything we've called the factors that will determine its success or otherwise one way or the other, what are your hopes?
Well, the first thing I'll tell you is that I think the plan is implementable. But it is implementable by competent persons. So if you do not have competent persons in place through the life of the plan, then it will go the way of any bad plan. Because a plan is only as good as you have people who can implement it. And so what I was saying earlier was that even the people to implement it will be a lot more serious if the youths, 100 million Nigerian youths, were politically active. Look, this plan recognizes a few things. We don't have any more time, but I just mentioned.
No, please go ahead.
Do you know that last year the fastest growing sector in Nigeria was ICT, technology, ICT. It grew by 12.6%. That was the fastest growing. In fact, it's the only sector that grew by double digits. So we're talking about an economy that's also changing. The fastest growing part of the economy is ICT. We also have a situation where Nigeria, whether we like it or not, has become a soft power in the world, which was not so before. When I say a soft power, whether we like it or not, Nigeria is now recognized globally in music, film, fashion, art. We have become a soft power. Every country cannot be a soft power. Soft powers are those whom, on account of, for whatever reason, they become dominant, and soft things like music, film, fashion, they excel and they influence the world. When you travel around the world, I was in Selfridges in London. They were a department store. They were playing music in the old store. It was a song by Simi from Nigeria. I was at Heathrow Airport coming back. They were playing music at the airport. It was a song by Burna Boy. So the point I'm making is that we've become a soft power. We're talking about the creative sector. There's more to Nigeria than just agriculture or the economy, always agriculture, in manufacturing. Over and above that, whether we like it or not now, Nigeria is moving into things like ICT, into the creative sector. The bulk of our youths are finding their way in that creative sector. So we can become a dominant soft power. And just to let you know why I think it's not something that every country can do. Not every country has the music and the film and things that are exportable. Ours is already exported. So we know it is exportable. So for instance, I said earlier on that in Africa, the second largest country in terms of number of people is Ethiopia. Have the Ethiopians been able to export their music or their film? Are you following what I'm saying now? That is not everybody. Even if you go to the Western world, US was also a soft power. Their soul music, their Hollywood. UK was a soft power. In today, in the 21st century, is Germany really a soft power? No. Theirs is about machinery, industrial. I mean, who in Nigeria, is dancing to German music today? So I'm making a point that there's more to Nigeria. By the special grace of God, over and above the traditional agriculture and manufacturing and things, oil and gas, it looks as if there are new emergent activities that may well have a major contributory role to take us to the promised land. In America, historically on the East Coast, there were industries, banks, finance. The West Coast was about Hollywood, music and stuff. Nigeria looks like we're also going to be like part of the US West Coast. Well, whether we like it or not, our youths have used their creative energies to expand our horizons there. So it's for those who manage the economy to understand that the structure of the economy is changing and those new sectors are as important. They may well be the sectors that will grow and grow so large to rescue us from our present path of very low, modest growth.
Mr. Peterside, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
That's today's program. Thanks for watching. We would like to know what you make of the conversation. Please reach out to us. Our social media handles are on your screen. You can also listen to previous episodes of the program via our podcast. Please visit our website, channelstv.com/podcast to get going. I'm Ladi Akiridoluale. Goodbye.